Hello guys, this is Joseph from Jouleconcepts. I welcome you to my channel once more. Today we're going to be looking at something very interesting, and that is WetMap in Redshift in Cinema 4D. So I have created a scene that I'm going to quickly show you what we're going to be doing. So if you look at what we have here, we have this effect. So you see the wetness of this terrain, and as the liquid goes away, you notice that it leaves behind trace of this. So that's what we're going to be looking at, how to set up stuff like this. I don't know if this tutorial might be a two-part, but let's see. But if it's a two-part, then we're just going to do the setup first. Then after the setup, the next thing we're going to do is texturing this, how we can get this. So without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. Okay guys, so I have this scene. I'm just going to quickly explain what I have here. I have a basic Realflow scene which I have already animated. Just I have a circular emitter which I already have animated, and you notice this is going off at this point, and it's because of the kill volume that I have here. So anything that is outside this box should be killed. I don't want them calculated. Then I have gravity. So those are basic things that I have here. So I just have and for the fluid I have a PB. Anyone works anyways, but for the purpose of what I want, just using a basic fluid system. Then in my scene I don't have anything going on. I don't really have anything going on. All right, so I'm just going to off this. So I'm going to give you some scenarios that you're going to have for this. So before I go to the first scenario, I want to quickly explain the subject matter before we start going into the scenario one by one, so that I could explain all those things. So if I create a plain object and just scale this up, just really scale this up and rotate this guy so that the particle will slide down. Okay, so I have this. Then if I play through, nothing happens. It doesn't interact with it because this object has to have a tag to it. So I'm going to right click on it, then go to Realflow tag. Then I'm going to add a collider tag. Then if you play through, the object collides with this and it slides down. All right, but if I zoom in and just up it a little bit, you notice that this object is kind of floating in the air and not really colliding with this object. And the reason is because for your collision distance you have 1 centimeter. So if I bring this down to 0, so I don't want to have anything, but really lately I've been using 0.01 just so we have a little bit of distance to it. Then if I play through and see what I have, then I can pause this and see again. You notice that nothing really changes. It's still the same thing, the same problem. So why we're having the same problem is because under my display, if I open the geometry, collision geometry, you notice that this object is kind of wide, so it's making use of this object's collision geometry. So for me to get rid of this and reduce this, what I'll do is to create another tag. So if I come here and go to Realflow tag, volume tag. So for the volume tag, the first thing I'm going to do is take this to high. All right, so if I do that, you notice nothing happens. If I replay, the collision is still at that level, but it's just a little bit. It brings this down a little bit. So that means this object is still going to have this distance to it. So once I play that, it's going to collide with this object and have that stuff. Okay, so it's making use of this particular distance here. So let me just hide that for a moment. So if you see through, you still have that small distance to it. Okay, so you can see that. So another way I found to solve that is going to the volume tag, then changing the cell size. So if I select the cell size and reduce this value. So if I make this somewhat 2, it should bring this calculation more accurate. Then another thing I'm going to do is my calculation is kind of slow, so I'm going to use my GPU. And the good thing is with Realflow is if you don't have a GPU, you can also still work with Realflow fine, so you don't really have issues with that. So if I play through, it thinks about it first because this is the first time I'm running the GPU on Realflow. So it's going to take a time to think about it, then afterwards it goes fine. So this is me explaining all this, so you can see that this object falls through. Some of them fall through. So this is another problem you get to have. So I basically going out of context now what we have. So when you have this kind of issue where your object is going through when your fluid rather is going through your object, all you need to do is just add the thickness to the object. So if I go here and add thickness to it, that solves that. So if I just create a cloth object and put this here, and for the cloth object I don't need subdivision, just seeking this, so maybe -10. So you look through, you have a little bit of thickness to it. So if you play through now, you shouldn't have that, you shouldn't have your fluid going through, so it's still going through. So that means I need more thickness to this. So if I try to go -20, then this solves this problem. And if not, I'm thinking what other things. So now I think for this to happen, we have to bring this guy over to this cloth surface objects, and that should be the solution to that. So let's see. Actually use this system overnight. So okay, so you see that is reduced. So the higher the thickness, the lower the fluid that will go through. But that's not the purpose of this tutorial, but that's just a tip. So I'm going to get this out. So the purpose of this tutorial is to talk about WetMap. So we have this guy set up, and then let's quickly see how the WetMap works. So you need a tag, because right now for you need a material, but right now if you go to this collision tag and you go over to the WetMap, you have to enable this guy. So this is enabled by default for you, and then if you play through, you notice that you don't really see any effect. The reason why you don't see this wetness is because you need to add a texture to this object that will now begin to show the wetness on this object. So if I pause this and go back, double click and create a texture, I don't really need reflectance. So if I go to the color section, I can go to the texture, then you're going to see your Realflow WetMap. So if you go into that and then add this over to your object and play, you notice you don't get to have anything. So that is where this scenario comes into play. All right, so let's look at all the scenario. I'm still going to come back to this guy. So if I go to scenario 1, which is this landscape that I have a bend deformer on, so I'm just going to transfer this tag that I've already created and put it on this guy. Then if you play through, you have the same problem. So I'm going to bring this texture also over to it. And if you play through this object right now, you notice that, okay, the fluid is going through fine, but you're not seeing the interaction of the fluid on the object. All right, so the first scenario tells you that Realflow was not designed actually to work with parametric objects. So right now you notice this is a landscape object and it's still parametric. So And the same thing we had for the plane was parametric. That's why you're not seeing this interaction on this plane. But we're going to get back to this in a moment. So I don't want to waste time with this. So what you take home from this is that for a parametric object, Realflow doesn't do well with them. So you don't get to have your wet tab. So the next thing I'm going to go to is the second scenario. So I'm just going to hide this. Then open the next scenario. It's still the same landscape object, but I've just converted it to an editable format. So I'm just going to bring all these guys and drag them to this next object. So once you have that drag to this next object and you try to play this again, you will see that you start to see something. So you should see something here. So let's see what the problem is. Okay, so we have this landscaped object and this here, Realflow tag, and okay, so you also don't see anything. All right, so the reason why you're not seeing anything right now, I'm still going to take it back to this place so you see that it's so for that. So the reason why you're not seeing this effect is because under your material, you need to go to the editor section and activate your animate preview. So once you activate animate, you start to see this stuff here playing through. So without it active, you will not have that. So once you have it, then you have to start seeing this preview. But then you will ask yourself, well, then why don't we try it with this? So if you bring this back to this guy and do that again, so if I hide this and bring this back up, okay, so this is the scenario one, so we have this. So if I play through, you will not see these objects. You can see that you're not having that, even though we have the animate preview, you're not seeing this guy, the web map on this object. So that's confirms what I said about parametric objects. So when an object is parametric, so I'm hiding that, bring this back. When an object is parametric, you don't have the wet map work on that. But when you convert the object to an editable format, then you start to see the wetness have an effect on your object. So you see this, then gradually it's going to fade away before that. So that solves that. And notice you have this object and it's working really fine. You see this is going through as the liquid is pouring on the object. So the reason why you can have this work this way is because some objects in Cinema 4D, some parametric objects in Cinema 4D have a very good UV space. So everything is laid out fine. So example of those are the plane, this landscape object, and so on and so forth. But then there are also some that don't have good UV space. So I'm going to go to the next scenario, which is just an object I created from cube. This object I created it from cube and just did extrusion, changing of things about and around. So if I bring this over to this guy and replay, and let's see how this will play well with these objects. So you notice this satisfies the demand of it being a parametric object, an editable object, not parametric, rather editable object. But then let's look at what we have if this will work now. So if we play through, you notice that as it touches, you're having some, even though the liquid hasn't gotten to this place, you're having this stuff playing through here and all, and this defeats everything. You would ask yourself, but this guy is parametric, so why am I having all these things here? The reason is because of the UV space. So the UV space on this object is not set. Yeah, it's not set. So that's why your wet map is not actually working fine. So how do you solve this problem to make sure that your wet map works pretty well the way it ought to? So that will take me to the next thing, which is working with your working on your UV space, because if you hold down shift and double click on this, you see this UV space, everything is laid down. So if I select this guy and go to the polygon mode, Control A, you notice everything is just on top of one another. If you select this, you see where this is. If you select this, you see where this is. So everything is not actually laid out well. So you need to change your UV space and work on it fine. So how can we do that? So for me to change the UV space, all I need to do is so let me just get back here. And then, so what I need to do is just select the objects. I'll get back to this for scenario later. So I'll select the object that I want to change the UV space and just go to my UV edit. So once I open my body paint UV edit, I'll select all the polygon. Once I have all the polygon selected, I'll go to this polygon, UV polygon. So if I click on the UV polygon, then I have this, and I can come down to the UV mapping here. So once I come down to the UV mapping and I come to optimal mapping, if I apply, just make sure I have the cubic. Anyone then can actually realign anyone you so which. Then I'm going to just apply. Then it's going to create all these UV and place them in this UV space. So that's how to do that. Then if I go out and go back to my standard, and let's see if this would have solved the problem. Okay, so if I play through now, you have this object, and then you see this works fine a little bit. You can see still at least does a little bit of things here and solves this pretty well. And thanks to the UV that we have done. But then another issue you're going to notice in some cases, you notice this going through to the back here, and you might also want to solve that. And what I actually do for practice is that I always like to set my UV fine by setting my what's it called, by setting my getting my seam line. So if you look at this place, you notice here everything is just cut off and the seam aren't really working fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to manually set my own seam where I want the seam to be. So if I select this object and I go to edge mode, so I can just click here. So I want a seam to be somewhere here, so I'll just hold down all this place and just get my seam line cut somewhere here. Okay, so what I'm doing is just getting out all this seam that I want to cut with. So I'll have this here. This should cut all through this place. So this is more where I'm going to be putting my scissors to cut through this object. All right, so I have that. Sorry about that. So I'm just going to have that also set at that point. Then somewhere here, because we're not going to be seeing the back. So another tip is when you are setting your seam line, always look for places where you know you're not going to, the camera is not going to be seeing. So I'm going to get rid of that. So I know that's fine. So I'm going to have my cut at that point, and possibly here also. Here. Let me have one more here and here. So I just want to have this. I think this is fine for me. Okay, so and here I might need to cut somewhere here, because I'm not going to be seeing this place because they are backing the camera, so I'm just going to have some cuts here and this edge. Actually need to have done this, but I just needed to explain to you how you get all those things so you understand the process, even though it's time consuming, but it's going to save you a ton of time later in the future. So when you're doing all this stuff, so select this and this, and let's just have this. So I'm going to have that cut, and maybe here also, because I'm going to be back in this place. So I think I'll just stop at that point. So once you have, sorry about that. So once you have all these set, then you go back to your UV edit, so BP UV edit. Then I'll go to polygon mode again, Control A, and select your UV polygon. Then now I'm not going to be using optimal mapping. I've already done optimal mapping, so I'll just go to relax UV. So before I do the relax UV, I always go to the projection and do a cubic projection and just look at the one that works fine. I think cubic 2 is fine for me. And then before I will now go to the UV. Then I'm going to select edge. So these are my settings. So I have the cut selected edge. You need to make sure you have it active. Check, then you have your realign. So just any of these algorithm works fine. You can just choose anyone. So once you have them set, just click on your apply. Then it's going to apply them and realign all these things. So those that are close by will have all these things set. So you notice all these things, all these space, all these polygons are realigned and all is fine. So if I go back to my startup, and then I can go back to model mode. So if I play through now, you should have this. Okay, so this has even damaged everything. Okay, so I will have to pause this and go back, then UV edit. Then I have this, so let's see. So we've already done the cut, so we can go back to optimal and realign. Okay. So let's see, UV, do this and go back, realign and everything. So I think this should solve that. I think I missed that. I should have gone back to the optimal to realign everything, make everything off fine. So if I go back here and play through, this should yeah, so these are solved that problem. You notice everything is fine here. So another thing with your Realflow WetMap is that your polygon also play a major role in deciding the quality of your wet map. You can notice everything right now, they are kind of pixelated, and it's because of some basic things. So the first of those is your polygon count. So you have very little and less polygon count here. So that's why you're having that. So what I'm going to do is go to the fourth scenario, which I think I will do myself here. I will just work on it there. So I'm going to go to polygon and have everything selected, right click and go to subdivide. So if I go to subdivide, I don't want to have smooth subdivision. This is fine for me. So maybe 4 and just subdivide this. 4 might be too much. So let's say we have 2. So we have this subdivision here. So if I hold down shift and double click here, you notice everything is still aligned and still placed well. So if you play through, you should have this look a little bit more smoother than that. So another factor to this is going to your um, Realflow tag and go to the WetMap section. Then you have your resolution. So right now the resolution is just 526. So usually depending on what you want, if you want to do your output, you can up this. So let's try 512, and this will work on the resolution here. The other thing is you have your filter strength. So the filter strength is more of the degree at which your wet flow has effect. Let me just show you what you have. So if we play through, we've changed this. You notice that these pixels are kind of smaller and smaller. So if I bring this up to 1024 and play through, you notice the detail here. Can you see the detail? So the more detail you want will be dependent on the resolution you have it. Then the other thing is you have your filter strength. If you bring this filter strength to 0 and play through, so let's see what you have. You can see here. So what that will do is the decay that you get to have, you don't have that with this filter strength being 0. You don't get to have the decay, and so that's where this filter strength comes. So if I bring the filter strength to let's go back to let's just go to 0.5. That might be too much. Let's try 0.15 and see what you have. You notice the smoothness in the whole thing. You see that? You see this fading at this point here. So that's what the filter strength does. So if you still want to blur all this more, what you need to do is just increase this. So if I make this 1, for instance, and play through, it's going to blur this even more. So you see that. You see the effect you get to have. So that's what the filter strength does. It kind of brushes this wetness and blend them together. So if that's the right terminology to say, then I'm going to take this to 0.5. Then the next one is the aging. The aging is more of the degree at which this what's it called, the wetness dries away. So if you look at aging 0, and the thing with this aging that I don't quite understand is that at 0 it fades away, but even if you increase this aging, it doesn't change anything really. It doesn't really change anything. It's just, I'm just going to show you so you see. So but what you would think is that when you increase the aging, that means it fades away very quickly, but then it doesn't do that. So if I bring this up, so let's just say this and do this. So I don't know if it's something Realflow should work on. So actually it's fading. You see it's fading more than the 0 and it's coming back. Wow, this is new. This is new. But then I think they must have worked on this because this the latest version that I'm using now. So you see that this fades gradually, and when you have it at 0 and play through, you don't have this liquid fade. It just stays there, and the rate at which it goes off is not that pronounced. See, I'm still having them here. But if I go back and increase this, so let's just say to 50. This might not work, but let's see. So you would expect that this should fade very quickly. So you see what I was saying. It doesn't really, it's fading, but you would expect it to fade very quickly than 5.1 that I had. But that's not the case here. So if we go back and see this, so what I would say here is just look at that right value that works for your scene, and then stick to that value, and then you can just work here. So You notice this even fades faster than 50, 5.2, fades faster than 50. So that explains what I was saying before now, that this value really don't tally or doesn't do what it expected to do. But then I think from here I can deduce that depending on your scene, just look for the value that works, and that is what you're going to do. So that's what I quickly wanted to show you guys, how you can create this. Then in the next tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to texture this, liquid and the wetness on this object. So I don't really want to take our time with this, so I just hope this was helpful. If you feel this was helpful, please do give me a like and a thumbs up, because it helps me in YouTube algorithm. And if you're new to my channel, please do subscribe, because I do tutorials like this every time. So do have a wonderful day, and God bless you. Bye.